what I'm going to do with the exam review is review the slides from each of the chapters, and I'm going to point out to you areas that will be particularly emphasized on the exam. I'm not saying that you just need to look at the slides. In some cases, I'm going to tell you you need to go back, and read the textbook for the discussion. I apologize if I look down periodically because I'll be looking down at my notes to make sure I've addressed all of the test questions. I don't think you all will mind that too much. So in the first chapter, in terms of the strategic management process, one of the things I want you to keep in mind is this idea of above average returns. And that means that we are focused on performance. No questions on position trade-off fit, although I think it's important for you to understand it. No questions on strategy changes. No questions here. Actually, I think I took them all out on hyper competition. Understanding this chart and knowing what the assumptions of the IO philosophy is. So understanding this chart is going to be important, as is this chart. And in some cases, even though multiple choice questions are usually associated with just spit back something, I actually have a lot of good application questions. So you're going to want to look these sections over, maybe reread the textbook, because it's not going to be a matter of just spitting something back at me. You're going to actually have to understand it. Even though I talked to you about vision and mission, and I don't think they're very important, I do want you to understand that, like I was making that joke, that vision tends to be forward-looking. What do we want to be in the future? Whereas mission statement is where we are today. Stakeholders, there are a couple of questions on stakeholders, so make sure that you understand the concepts, who's in what category and what interests they have. No questions on strategic leaders, and nothing about the Devil Wears Prada. I'm going to pause and take a look at my notes. Okay, we're good on chapter 1. It is on to chapter 2. In chapter 2, you're going to want to be familiar with the various segments of the general environment and understand what factors fall into which. Next, we get into Porter's 5 forces, and the best I can tell you on the Porter's 5 forces is you have to know everything. There are probably 8 questions out of Porter's 5 forces. Some are relatively simple, kind of spit back the charts to me. Others are definitely application questions. So this is a section of charts I would view very carefully, and then I would make sure that I also understand how to apply them. Some specific words you're going to want to be thinking about are what constitute economies of scale, the definition of an industry. Make sure you've got a grasp of strategic stakes. These are just some specific hints. And then we talked about the idea of strategic groups. Actually, no questions on strategic groups. We talked about the idea of competitive intelligence, whether these things were fair, and forecasting and the importance of forecasting. So I think that's it for chapter 2. Again, no Porter's 5 forces inside and out. Lots of questions there. For chapter 3, this is going to be about the resource-based view, so make sure you're comfortable with what constitutes the resource-based view and also the internal analysis. We talked about the idea of value being very important, understanding how value is created and what we do with it. The difference between tangible and intangible resources is going to be important, and there's a good application question that's going to test whether you understand some key fundamental differences between the two. This chart is extremely important. You're going to want to know everything on this chart very well, so make sure you reread the textbook in this section. And also the idea of substitutes is also very important. Value chain activities, don't really have a specific question on that, although I think what you're going to find is that we talk about how they tie into generating value. Question about outsourcing and why it's done and when it works well. And let me look down the sheet. I think we are good on chapter 3. On to chapter 4. Again, in chapter 4, I have lots of application questions that are going to test your ability to understand what is whether you're able to apply what we're reading. So this is really the key thing where the questions pick up, because you're going to see I'm going to ask you questions about potentially all 5 of the different strategies, and I'm going to ask you to apply the differences and understand what's important. So make sure you know what kind of product a cost leadership company produces. Make sure you remember how that can translate into higher profitability. And be aware of some of the trade-offs involved in the value chain for a cost leadership. Then in differentiation, again, understand when a competitive advantage is likely to come from a differentiation strategy and the points of differentiation. Again, the sorts of value chain issues that are going to lead to successes in the differentiation strategy. And also understand how it provides more flexibility and how it fits into Porter's 5 forces. The focus strategies, I'm not sure that I have a direct question on the focus strategies, so I wouldn't put as much interest in that. And then the integrated cost leadership and differentiation strategy, understand the perils, talk about what stuck in the middle means, so make sure you're familiar with that, and why the cost leadership differentiation strategy is typically the most difficult to execute. So just to sum up, there's going to be 40 multiple choice questions. You're going to have 1 hour to complete the exam. I expect you to do very well, and if you review the sections of the slides and the textbooks that I pointed you toward, you should do very well. Good luck.